The light of dawn filtered through the cobblestone streets of Santa Fe as Emily Thompson gazed at her coffee plantation from the balcony of her ancestral estate. At 45, she was the owner of the most prestigious coffee plantation in the region, an empire built with the sweat of 3 generations. Yet her heart held a secret that would soon shake the foundations of everything she had built. In the kitchen, Dorothy, her loyal housekeeper of 20 years, prepared breakfast while humming an old Chiapas tune. The aroma of freshly ground coffee mingled with the scent of freshly baked sweetbread, creating a symphony of smells that awakened the senses. "Ma'am, this letter arrived," Dorothy announced, handing over a yellowish envelope with a postmark. "From Spain." Emily took it with trembling hands, immediately recognizing the handwriting. It was from Frederick Monroe, her first love, the man who had left the town 25 years ago, without knowing she was carrying his child. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" Dorothy asked, noticing the pallor on her employer's face. "Yes, Dorothy." "I just need a moment," Emily replied, retreating to her study. The letter revealed that Frederick, now a prominent businessman in Madrid, would return to Santa Fe to establish a major coffee trade route. What he didn't know was that his son, Alexander, worked as the head taster at Emily's estate, believing he was the son of her late husband, Richard Valdez. Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, Alexander Valdez, a handsome young man of 24, shared his knowledge of coffee with Isabel Monroe, Frederick's daughter, who had arrived weeks earlier to learn about the family business. Unknowingly, the half-siblings had developed a special chemistry that went beyond friendship. "Coffee is like love," Alexander explained to Isabel as they smelled different roasted beans. "Each variety has its own personality, its own aroma, its own story." Isabel looked at him mesmerized, captivated not only by his knowledge, but also by his passion as he spoke. "In Madrid, there are many coffee experts, but none talk about it the way you do," she replied, inching dangerously closer. The chapter culminates with Emily observing from afar the interaction between the young ones, aware that Frederick's arrival could destroy not only the budding love between Alexander and Isabel, but also the peace she had built over all these years. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from, and let's keep going. The news of Frederick Monroe's arrival spread through Santa Fe like the aroma of coffee on a cool morning. In the local market, vendors gossiped about the return of the prodigal son who had left for Spain, leaving behind promises and broken hearts. Catherine Rose, Emily's mother, now a 70-year-old woman living in a small house near the Thompson estate, was the first to sense that something was about to change. "The coffee leaves are moving differently," she told her daughter during an afternoon visit. "There are secrets that cannot stay buried forever." Meanwhile, Isabel began to frequent the estate more often under the pretext of learning about the cultivation process. Her encounters with Alexander became more frequent and more intimate. One afternoon, as they walked among the coffee fields, their hands accidentally brushed. "Do you know why this coffee is so special?" asked Alexander, holding a handful of freshly harvested beans. "Because it grows in volcanic soil, nourished by centuries of history." "Like us," replied Isabel, "who found each other here after our families have been connected to this land for generations." What neither of them knew was that Dorothy, from the kitchen window, had been watching their growing closeness with concern. The loyal housekeeper was the only person, besides Emily, who knew the truth about Alexander's origins. In Madrid, Frederick Monroe was preparing his trip to Mexico. On his desk, an old photograph showed a young Emily standing beside him, both smiling in front of a coffee field. His assistant, Luke Harrison, entered with some documents. "Mr. Monroe, the export contracts are ready," announced Luke. "But there's something you should know about the Thompson estate." "What is it?" asked Frederick, intrigued. "The head taster, Alexander Valdez. There are rumors about his true identity." Frederick dismissed the conversation with a wave of his hand. "Rumors are like the wind through the coffee fields, Luke. They come and go." Back at the Thompson estate, Emily decided to confront her son. During an afternoon coffee tasting, as Alexander evaluated a new harvest, she gathered her courage. "Son, I need to tell you something about your father, Emily began, but she was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Isabel. Alexander, my father is arriving tomorrow, Isabel announced excitedly. He wants to meet the famous taster who has captivated his daughter. Emily's face turned pale. Time had run out. Frederick would arrive sooner than expected, and with him, a storm of truths that threatened to sweep everything in its path. The chapter ends with Emily in her study, holding two photographs, one of Alexander as a baby and another of Frederick in his youth. The resemblance was undeniable. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, bringing her closer to the moment she had feared for 25 years. The morning Frederick Monroe returned to Santa Fe, the sky dawned covered in grey clouds as if nature itself foreshadowed the emotional storm about to unfold. His arrival at the local airport caused a stir. Time had been kind to him, preserving his elegant demeanor and that piercing gaze that had captivated Emily Thompson years ago. Isabel ran to embrace her father, while Alexander watched the scene from a cautious distance. "Father, this is Alexander Valdez, our master coffee taster," Isabel introduced proudly. The moment Frederick and Alexander shook hands seemed to freeze time. Something in the young man's eyes, in the shape of his smile, stirred an inexplicable sense of familiarity in Frederick. "I've heard wonders about your talent with coffee," Frederick remarked, studying Alexander's face. "You remind me of someone I knew many years ago." At the Thompson estate, Emily prepared for the inevitable encounter. She had chosen a dark brown dress, understated yet elegant, like the seeds that had been the center of her life. Dorothy watched her as she fixed her hair. "Are you sure you don't want me to stay during the meeting, Ma'am?" she asked worriedly. "No, Dorothy. There are battles one must face alone," replied Emily with a firm voice. The business meeting was scheduled for the afternoon in the main hall of the estate. The atmosphere was tense when Frederick crossed the threshold. 25. Years of absence materialized in a glance that lasted mere seconds but contained a lifetime of secrets. "Emily," greeted Frederick softly, "time has been generous to you." "Welcome, Frederick," she replied, maintaining her composure. "I see Spain has treated you well." The meeting unfolded with discussions about prices, quality, and export routes. Alexander dazzled everyone with his knowledge of coffee, while Isabel looked at him with poorly concealed admiration. Frederick, for his part, couldn't help but notice the young taster's gestures and mannerisms, so similar to his own. During a break, Frederick approached Emily while the young ones went out to the garden. "There's something about that boy," Frederick began. "His passion for coffee, the way he speaks. It reminds me of myself at his age." Emily felt her heart stop. "Frederick, there's something you need to know." But before she could continue, a shout from the garden interrupted the conversation. Isabel had stumbled near the greenhouse, and Alexander was holding her in his arms, their faces dangerously close. The scene provoked different reactions. Frederick frowned, Emily paled, and Dorothy, who was watching from the kitchen, dropped a coffee cup that shattered on the floor. The chapter concludes with Emily watching through the window as Alexander and Isabel abruptly pull apart, aware of the eyes on them. In her hands, she clutches a yellowed envelope containing Alexander's original birth certificate, where Frederick's name appears as the father. The tension in the estate was palpable. The incident in the garden had left everyone uneasy, especially Frederick, who couldn't help but feel a mix of paternal jealousy and an odd sense of familiarity with Alexander. That night, as the full moon illuminated the coffee fields, Emily was in her study, torn between revealing the truth or keeping the secret she had guarded for so long. Dorothy entered with a tray of coffee. "Mum, don't you think it's time to tell the truth?" she asked softly. Emily sighed deeply. "Dorothy, how can I destroy everything we've built? Alexander is the heart of this estate." Meanwhile, on the porch of the house, Alexander and Isabel shared a cup of coffee under the stars. "There's something I don't understand," said Isabel. "I feel like I've known you my whole life, but at the same time there's a mystery about you that I can't figure out." Alexander took her hand. "Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain hidden, like the secrets held within each coffee bean." At that moment, Frederick stepped onto the porch, interrupting the intimate moment. His face showed a mix of complex emotions. "Isabel, it's late. You should go rest," he said in a curt tone. Then turning to Alexander, he added, "Young Valdez, I would like you to show me the roasting process tomorrow. There is much we can learn from each other." The next morning, as Alexander guided Frederick through the roastery, Emily made a decision. She called Catherine, her mother, asking her to come to the estate. "Mom, I need your strength. Today is the day the truth will come to light," Emily said with a trembling voice. In the roastery, the conversation between Frederick and Alexander grew increasingly personal. "You know, when I was your age, I was also in love with a woman from this town," Frederick confessed, watching as Alexander skillfully handled the beans. "What happened?" asked Alexander, intrigued. "Life pulled us apart. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed," Frederick replied, his voice filled with nostalgia. Suddenly, a noise at the entrance of the roastery interrupted them. It was Isabel who had been listening to the conversation. "Who were you in love with, Dad?" he asked curiously. Before Frederick could respond, Emily appeared at the door, accompanied by Catherine and Dorothy. Her face showed determination, mixed with fear. "Frederick, Alexander, Isabel, there's something you need to know," Emily began. "It's a truth I've kept hidden for 25 years, a truth that will change our lives forever." The air grew tense, the aroma of freshly roasted coffee mingled with the anticipation of the moment. Frederick looked at Emily, recognizing in her eyes the same intensity that had captivated him years ago. "Emily, what's going on?" Frederick asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emily took a deep breath and pulled the yellowed envelope from her pocket. "Alexander, the man you believed to be your father, he's not your real father." Alexander felt as though the world had stopped. Isabel stifled a gasp. Frederick, sensing what was about to come, leaned against one of the coffee roasters. "Your real father, Alexander," continued Emily, tears in her eyes, "is Frederick Monroe." The silence that followed was deafening. The coffee beans continued to spin in the roaster, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. The revelation hung in the air like the bitter aroma of burnt coffee, forever altering the flavor of their lives. The chapter ends with Alexander alternately looking at Emily and Frederick, while Isabel in shock steps back toward the door. The truth, like the coffee beans, had finally come to light, ready to be ground by the weight of its consequences. The roaster, which moments earlier had witnessed a shocking revelation, was now plunged into a tomb-like silence. Alexander, pale-faced and with trembling hands, was the first to break the silence. How could you hide this from me my entire life?" he asked, his voice breaking with every word. Emily, tears streaming down her cheeks, tried to approach her son. "Alexander, my love, I did it to protect you." Frederick, still stunned by the news, interjected. "Emily, why didn't you tell me?" She had the right to know. Isabel, who had been in shock until that moment, burst into tears and ran out of the coffee roaster. The sound of her footsteps fading seemed to snap everyone out of their stupor. "Isabel, wait!" shouted Alexander, but Frederick stopped him. "No, son, I'll go after her," said Frederick, the word son sounding strange on his lips. As Frederick went out to look for Isabel, Dorothy and Catherine approached to comfort Emily, who seemed on the verge of collapsing. "I need air," murmured Alexander, rushing out toward the coffee fields. In the days that followed, the estate was plunged into emotional chaos. Alexander refused to speak to Emily, spending long hours in the coffee fields lost in his thoughts. Frederick, torn between his newfound fatherhood and his concern for Isabel, wandered the property like a lost soul. Isabel, for her part, locked herself in the guest room, refusing to see anyone. The news that the man she was falling for was actually her half-brother had devastated her. One afternoon, while Emily was going through old photo albums in her office, Frederick walked in unannounced. "We need to talk," he said in a serious tone. "Why, Emily? Why did you deny me the chance to be a father?" Emily looked at him with tired eyes. "When you left, Frederick, you promised you'd come back in a few months. A year passed, and I heard nothing from you. I was scared, alone. And then I met Richard. And you decided he would be a better father than me." Frederick asked, hurt. "Richard offered me stability, a home for my child, "It was a difficult decision, but at the time I believed it was the best thing for Alexander," she replied, her voice breaking. Meanwhile, in the coffee fields, Alexander found Isabel sitting under a coffee tree, her eyes swollen from crying. "Isa," he began, but she interrupted him. "Don't say anything, Alexander. I can't process all of this." "Neither can I," he admitted, sitting down beside her. "My whole life has been a lie." "Do you know what the worst part is?" said Isabel, looking at him with a mix of pain and tenderness. "That despite everything, I can't stop feeling what I feel for you." Alexander took her hand, feeling the weight of the forbidden in that simple gesture. "Neither can I, Isa, and it's destroying me." In the kitchen of the estate, Dorothy was preparing coffee for everyone, as if the aroma could somehow heal the open wounds. Catherine joined her, the two women exchanging worried glances. "Do you think they'll ever be able to forgive Emily?" asked Dorothy. Catherine sighed deeply. "Forgiveness is like coffee, Dorothy. Sometimes bitter, sometimes sweet, but always necessary to move forward." The chapter concludes with Emily standing on the balcony of the estate, watching the sunset over the coffee fields. In her hands she holds a cup of coffee, the dark liquid reflecting the orange and purple-tinged sky. As she contemplates the empire she has built, she realizes that the true challenge is just beginning, rebuilding her family on the foundations of a long-buried truth. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching from, and let's keep moving forward. Dawn found the Thompson estate engulfed in a tense silence. The revelations of the previous days had left all its inhabitants in a state of shock, each grappling with their own inner demons. Alexander, unable to sleep, decided to start the harvest early. Physical labor had always been his escape, and now more than ever, he needed that distraction. As he picked the coffee beans, each one seemed to hold a fragment of his lost identity. Frederick, on the other hand, was in the estate's library, reviewing old documents and photographs. Among them, he found a letter that Emily had never sent, dated just a few months after her departure to Spain. With trembling hands, he began to read, "Dear Frederick, there is something you must know. I am pregnant. Our child will grow up among the coffee plantations we loved so much. Please come. Back soon. Always yours, Emily." The realization of what could have been hit Frederick like a wave. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks as he clutched the letter to his chest. In the kitchen, Isabel was helping Dorothy prepare breakfast, seeking some sense of normalcy in the routine. "Dorothy, how could you keep this secret for so long?" asked Isabel as she whisked the eggs. The old woman sighed deeply. "Child, sometimes love makes us do things we don't understand. Your father and Alexander deserve to know the truth, but it wasn't my secret to tell." Emily, unable to face her family, had taken refuge in the small lab where they tasted the coffee. Surrounded by jars and beans, she sought solace in the aromas that had been the center of her life. Catherine found her there, lost in her thoughts. "Darling, you can't hide forever," she said softly. "Mum, I've ruined everything. Alexander hates me. Frederick will never trust me again. And Isabel..." Emily couldn't continue, choked by tears. Catherine embraced her daughter. "Coffee teaches us that even from the bitterest beans, sweetness can be extracted. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions and seek forgiveness." Meanwhile, in the coffee fields, Alexander was surprised to see Isabel approaching with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," she said, offering him a cup. Alexander took it, their fingers brushing for a moment. "Thank you, Isa. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she replied, sitting down beside him. "I just want you to know that despite everything, I'm here for you." The silence between them was heavy with unspoken emotions, with a love that now seemed impossible. In the main house, Frederick finally decided to confront Emily. He found her in the study, surrounded by papers and with a look of defeat on her face. "Why didn't you come looking for me?" he asked, his voice a mix of pain and reproach. Emily looked at him, her eyes reflecting years of regret. "I was afraid, Frederick. Afraid you wouldn't come back, afraid of raising a child alone. When Richard appeared, I saw a chance to give Alexander the family I thought we'd never have." "You robbed us of the chance to be a family," Frederick replied, his voice breaking. "All of us." As the day wore on, the tension at the estate seemed to reach a boiling point. It was then that Dorothy, in an act of wisdom born from years of observation, decided to step in. She gathered everyone in the grand hall of the estate, the place where so many harvests had been celebrated. "Listen carefully," she began, her voice steady despite her age. "The coffee we produce here is known for its complex flavor, for its ability to blend bitterness with sweetness. You are like those beans, each with your own story, your own flavor, but together you can create something beautiful." Her words seemed to pierce the armor of pain and resentment that everyone had built. Alexander looked at his mother, seeing for the first time the weight of the years and the secrets on her shoulders. Frederick watched his son, recognizing in him the passion and strength he once had. Isabel, with tears in her eyes, took Alexander's hand, a gesture of support and fraternal love. Emily, summoning all her courage, stepped forward. "I have failed, all of you, and there are not enough words to express my regret. But if you give me the chance, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for my mistakes." The chapter ends with the family reunited, the aroma of coffee filling the room, symbolizing the possibility of a new beginning. Though the road to reconciliation would be long and difficult, they had taken the first step, facing the truth together. The following days at the Thompson estate passed in a delicate balance between tension and hope. The truth, now exposed, had created deep cracks in relationships, but it had also opened the possibility of healing old wounds. One morning, Alexander decided to confront Emily. He found her in the greenhouse, tending to the youngest coffee plants. "Mom," he said, his voice still laden with conflicting emotions, "I need to understand. I need you to tell me everything from the beginning." Emily, with trembling hands, set down the watering can and sat on a small bench. Alexander settled in front of her, ready to listen to the full story of his origin. "It all began 25 years ago," Emily started, her voice barely a whisper. "Frederick and I were young, passionate, full of dreams." As the story unfolded, Alexander listened intently, his eyes alternating between pain and understanding. Emily spoke of the intense love she shared with Frederick, the plans they had, and the fear that overwhelmed her when she found herself alone and pregnant. "When I met Richard, I saw an opportunity to give you the family I thought you deserved," Emily concluded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "But now I realize that in trying to protect you, I denied you the truth about your origin." Alexander remained silent for a moment, processing all the information. Finally, he took his mother's hands in his own. "I appreciate your honesty, Mom. I can't say I fully forgive you yet, but I understand why you did it." Meanwhile, in another part of the estate, Frederick and Isabel were having their own difficult conversation. "Dad, how do you feel knowing you have a son?" asked Isabel, carefully watching her father's reaction. Frederick sighed deeply. "It's overwhelming, sweetheart. I feel joy for having found Alexander, but also a deep sadness for all the lost years." "And what will happen to us now?" inquired Isabel, her voice betraying her concern. Frederick hugged his daughter. "You will always be my little girl, Isa. Having Alexander in my life doesn't change the love I feel for you. Simply our family has grown." That afternoon, Dorothy organized a special gathering in the tasting room. She had prepared a selection of the finest coffees from the estate, each representing a significant moment in the family's history. "Coffee," Dorothy began as she poured the cups, "is like life, sometimes bitter, sometimes sweet, but always complex and full of surprises." Everyone took their cups, the familiar aroma offering a strange comfort amid the emotional storm. "This one," she said, pointing to the first cup, "is from the harvest of the year you were born, Alexander. And this one, from the year Isabel came into the world." As they savored each coffee, the tensions began to slowly dissipate. Frederick and Alexander, sitting side by side, discovered they shared the same refined palate for detecting the subtle nuances in every sip. Emily watched the scene with a mix of relief and nostalgia. "Perhaps," she thought, "from this bitter experience, we can extract something sweet, just as we do with coffee beans. The conversation flowed more easily with each cup, touching on topics ranging from cultivation techniques to childhood memories. Isabel, seated between Alexander and Frederick, began to see the possibility of a new family dynamic, different but no less valuable than the one she had known. As night fell, the family gathered on the porch of the estate, gazing at the coffee fields bathed in moonlight. The silence that enveloped them was no longer tense but contemplative. Alexander was the first to speak. "I don't know exactly how, but I believe we can make this work. We're like these coffee fields, resilient, capable of flourishing even in difficult terrain." Frederick nodded, placing a hand on the shoulder of his newly discovered son. "You're right, we've lost a lot of time, but we still have the chance to create something beautiful together." Emily, with tears in her eyes, added, "I ask for your forgiveness once again, and I promise that from now on there will only be truth between us." Isabel, taking Alexander's hand in a gesture of brotherly affection, smiled. "I think we all deserve a second chance, like a new harvest." The chapter ends with the family united, gazing out at the coffee fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. The aroma of coffee floated in the air, mingling with the promise of a new beginning. Though the path to full reconciliation would be long, they had taken the first steps together, as a family. 6 months had passed since the revelation that shook the foundations of the Thompson estate. Time, like well-ripened coffee, had softened some of the initial rough edges, allowing new bonds to form and old wounds to begin healing. It was the time of the most important harvest of the year, and the entire family was involved. Alexander, who had taken on a more prominent role in managing the estate, coordinated the efforts from dawn. "Dad," he called to Frederick, who had stayed in Mexico to be part of this new chapter of his life. "I need your opinion on these beans." Frederick, still thrilled every time Alexander called him Dad, approached to examine the red fruits. "Excellent ripening, son. I think this will be our best harvest yet." Emily watched the interaction from the window of the main office, a mix of joy and melancholy on her face. Isabel joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "It's beautiful to see you all working together, isn't it?" Isabel remarked. Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "I never thought I would see this day." "Thank you, Isabel, for your understanding and support during these months." "We are family," Isabel replied with a warm smile. "We are all learning to be one in a new way." In the field, Dorothy supervised the harvesters, her experience invaluable. "At this crucial moment, remember, every bean tells a story," she told them. "Treat them with the same care you would your own children." As the day progressed, the excitement grew at the estate. This harvest not only promised to be exceptional in quality, but also symbolized the rebirth of the Thompson-Monroe family. At sunset, when the last sacks of coffee were taken to the processing area, Emily gathered everyone in the central courtyard. He had prepared a surprise. "Family," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "These months have been an incredible journey for all of us. We have faced painful truths, but we have also discovered the strength of forgiveness and family love. To commemorate this new beginning, I have decided to create a new coffee blend." Alexander, intrigued, asked, "A new blend, Mom?" Emily nodded, revealing 4 different types of beans. "Each of these represents one of us. Alexander, your strength and passion are in these high-altitude beans. Frederick, your distinctive character is reflected in these shade-grown beans. Isabel, your sweetness is in these low-altitude beans, and I'm in these heirloom beans with all our history." Frederick, moved, took Emily's hand. "It's a beautiful idea, a true fusion of our lives." "We'll call it Reborn Family," announced Emily, "and it will be our new flagship product." That night, under a starry sky, the family gathered around a bonfire in the middle of the coffee fields. Dorothy served the first taste of the new blend in handmade ceramic cups. Alexander raised his cup in a toast. "To our family, to our coffee, and to second chances." Everyone drank, savoring not just the coffee, but the moment. The flavor was complex, notes of bitterness from the past blended with the sweetness of forgiveness and the promise of a future together. Isabel, looking around, smiled. "It's strange to think how things have changed. 6 months ago, I thought I had lost a love, but in reality, I gained an entire family." Frederick embraced his 2 children. Life, like good coffee, sometimes needs time to reveal its true flavor. I'm grateful that we can finally enjoy it together. Emily, observing her gathered family, felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The secret she had carried for so long had transformed into something beautiful and unifying. I propose we make this a tradition, she suggested. Every year during the main harvest, we'll gather here to celebrate our unity and renew our bonds. Everyone agreed, sealing the promise with another sip of their new family blend. As the night deepened and the stars shimmered above the coffee fields, the Thompson-Monroe family realized they had achieved something extraordinary. From the bitter beans of truth and pain, they had extracted a rich blend of love, forgiveness, and unity. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming flowers, creating an olfactory symphony that would be etched in their memories forever. It was the scent of home, of family, and of a future full of promise. And so among the coffee fields that had witnessed their history, they found not only reconciliation, but also a new beginning. The Thompson estate, with its secrets now revealed and its wounds in the process of healing, stood as a testament to the power of family love and the resilience of the human spirit. As the bonfire slowly faded, leaving only glowing embers, each family member realized they had found something more valuable than the finest coffee. They had found truth, forgiveness, and most importantly, they had found themselves in the process. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching from. We're moving forward.